everybody, and welcome to Crypto Sapiens. I am here today with an amazing guest, Avril from Neutron in the Cosmos ecosystem, and I'm your host today, Rachel. Avril, we're so happy to have you here. I've been really wanting to learn more about Neutron and more about the Cosmos ecosystem, so we are super happy to have you today. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about who you are, what got you into Web3 and Neutron, and what is your why?
Hey, thanks, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here. Long time coming as well, so pretty excited. So I'm Avril. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hadron Labs, the company that developed, a meaningful part of Neutron's code. Neutron is a cross-chain smart contracting platform. I'm sure we'll get plenty of occasions to go back to this. Now, to your question, it's actually kind of a long story, so feel free to interrupt me if I'm going.
No, we love it here. Go into the long, passionate rants.
Back in the days, I was very into a lot of kind of like the concerns around privacy on the internet and Web2 in general. The Snowden revelations and all of that ensued sort of like ingrained this like very deeply into sort of like my conception of the world. That plus events like the financial crisis, like Lehman Brothers and such, kind of basically led me to have a bit of a distrust of a lot of the most established and like financial and web and like organizations that there were. And so while I was at high school, actually, I learned about like Bitcoin as a technology, and it kind of like immediately clicked because what I liked about it basically was, hey, now here's this new technology that allows, that promises to allow us to basically, transfer value and own, have our own financial system that does not depend on sort of like these intermediaries that have been shown, numerous times to be, sort of like susceptible to the flaws of like mankind, let's say. Now here we can solve that by, code that everybody can see, review, agree with the rules of, and just run on their computer basically. And so that was like super as a kind of like way of framing this entire like part of the economy that was like super interesting to me. And then digging deeper into Bitcoin, which my first Bitcoin I bought in like my high school cafeteria in the queue before getting the food.
That's awesome.
And I was kind of like just like on my phone at the time, just like learning about how it works and what other blockchain technologies were out there. And that's sort of like when I learned about like Ethereum. And then, that blew my mind like on a whole different level, because now, what you could do with Bitcoin to like transfer value with the idea of smart contracts, you could do to basically anything that you could encode. And so like, I thought that this might actually change the way that society operates, because now, you could have like basically most of the economy, or at least its kind of like administrative part and financial part on the chain basically, and have like transparent rules for everything. And so, like those two things basically caught me onto the space. And I started like digging deeper and learning how the technology itself works. I did, take some distance from the space for a while because, like life was happening. I graduated, I got my master's. I worked as a journalist for a couple of years, throughout like Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, as an investigative journalist.
Wow.
So all that was happening, but then, eventually kind of like DeFi summer started. And so I started hearing back like about crypto again, and was like, oh, wow, I forgot about this, but wait, where is it at now? And so, I got back into the space and discovered that now, there was an actual economy in here, right? Like Uniswap had launched, and, like Compound and all of these other like maker protocols like were super interesting. And I was like, right, but I don't understand how an AMM works. And so, there was the kind of like second phase of research and discovering about the space, of like just discovering how the mechanisms themselves work. And so that's really when I sort of like got caught on to the space. I basically started like, working and researching at night, and then, working as a journalist during the day. That went on for a couple of years until, while I was researching both on like being active both on Ethereum, but also on Terra increasingly over time, I kind of like, discovered got the full picture of the ecosystem on Terra, because I was there from the start, basically. So I knew all the teams, I knew all of the protocols. And so eventually, there was an occasion at which I started like interacting with folks from the Lido on Terra team. And, we got on a couple of calls, and eventually they offered to hire me. So I joined. And from there on, at the time, the team was like very technical, and I was the only one that wasn't, from a technical background. And so I started doing the communications, and then the marketing, and then the BD as well. And then like over time, it just like started picking up more and more of these tasks until, I was asked to basically lead the team at the time where we were sort of like, in this sort of like transformative period where, one, we had been trying to expand this DeFi protocol that was tremendously successful on Terra. Lido on Terra was like $10 billion TVL. It's almost as big as like Lido on Ethereum, which is the largest DeFi protocol, is today. So it was a massive success on Terra, but there was this entire ecosystem, the Cosmos ecosystem next door, that it was completely unable to reach. And there were a number of challenges to actually be able to do so. Lack of security, lack of kind of like ecosystem alignment, and more than anything else, like lack of the right cross-chain technology to allow that protocol to scale, basically. And so, we looked at this and we found a solution, right? We designed a solution for that problem. And as we were sort of like working on this, and like a few things kind of like happened in parallel. First, a technology that was long awaited on the Cosmos Hub was about to be released. That's like replicated security, and replicated security fit our solution really well because it provided very high degree of security from the get-go. And
what was the type of security again? What was that?
Replicated security. So it's basically you take the entire validator set and the entire stake of a proof of stake blockchain, and you replicate it onto another blockchain, essentially, right?
Got it. Okay.
We can dive deeper into this. But basically it gives Neutron or any chain that runs on that technology the same security as the Cosmos Hub, the most valuable, the oldest, the first Cosmos blockchain, basically. And so, that technology was, coming like just around the corner at that time. And it solved two of our problems. And so, we started looking into it. And at the same time, like as we were kind of like seeing how we could potentially like leverage these technologies, there was a proposal on the Cosmos Hub that said, hey, we're preparing the go-to-market of that technology called replicated security. We're looking for, a few really talented teams to be the first to build on it, basically, and we'll support you with a proposal, some funding, and the support from the community, basically. And that last part was the most valuable thing to us because ecosystem alignment was basically part of the fundamental problem that we were trying to solve, essentially. And so around the same time, like Terra started crashing, and so basically everything aligned for us to be able to like fully commit to building this, right? And so from this initial idea of like realizing, hey, we have a successful DeFi protocol, but we're unable to scale it across chain. Here's the problem, right? It's difficult to scale a DeFi protocol. We designed a solution that just like kind of like fit directly into the market due to the circumstances of like, hey, actually, here's the infrastructure you need to do so. And so there it is. And now Neutron is live. It's been, a very interesting journey so far.
Wow. Well, that's amazing to hear about your It sounds like you have such a diverse background, going from journalism to Web3, investigative journalism in Asia to Web3. That's amazing. So yeah, we went kind of all over the place there, but I really always want to start off an episode with, what is your why? Like, what is your core purpose for doing what you do every day? Like, what gets you excited about your work?
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm excited about is that I think there's a good chance that if we build the right infrastructure and the right tools, will enable like people like you, me, everybody else on the planet to basically, recreate so like a lot of the institution and structure of society in a way that is like a lot more transparent, basically. And I think if done properly, I think that can have massive benefits to everyone. So that's sort of like, what drives me. That and the fact that, I'm a bit of, and I think, that's what brought me to both journalism and to like crypto. It's like, I like learning about new things, and especially the complex things that kind of like blow your mind. That's extremely stimulating for me, basically. And, crypto and especially DeFi is awesome for this because it's like, there's always something new and it's always complex.
Oh yeah.
You see how it works and you're like, okay, that makes sense now. So that's kind of like
I mean, I didn't expect to start getting into podcasting and interviewing people, but there's just so many interesting, intelligent people in the space. I always want to talk to people and be learning as much as possible. And I know our AV guy, Eureka John, shout out Eureka John. I know he'll be watching this and editing this. So I know he's been a part of something called JournoDAO. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So
I haven't heard about it like specifically, but from the name I can infer what they're doing.
Yeah. So I mean, hey, I can connect you with Eureka John and JournoDAO. There might be some good synergy there.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So yeah, I just want to rewind a little bit for our listeners today and just give a high level breakdown, like an explanation of what Neutron is and what problems it's solving.
Yeah, for sure. So Neutron is a very secure cross-chain smart contracting platform. What it does is simply, so there's the industry as a whole is becoming increasingly multi-chain, right? We have more and more chains, and each of them have their own ecosystem and markets, even though there might be overlaps, right? And the thing is, like, to be able to build a sustainable business, for your protocol to be sustainable, basically, it needs to find product market fit, right? It needs to provide a service to a market, right? There needs to be a market. Except due to that increasingly multi-chain world, it's actually fairly difficult. Like the market is like pretty fragmented, and addressing multiple markets separately doesn't really work, right? So we've seen this with like Sushi or, even Curve, basically. Like there's a number of protocols now that were forked and, relaunched on numerous networks. And that's all well and good. But the problem is that now they have additional overhead. They need to maintain multiple versions of their protocol that cater for the different peculiarities of each blockchain. And they don't get any sort of beyond the brand recognition, I guess, there's very little sort of network effects or compounding benefits to being on multiple chains, right? Whereas if you could somehow, make one protocol that actually exists across multiple chains and can service the aggregate market, basically, as kind of like a cohesive thing, then that protocol would basically be a lot more powerful, essentially, right? So imagine, for example, like a decentralized exchange. You have your liquidity and you have demand, right? But your liquidity might not be on the same chain as where you have demand, right? And so being able to sort of allocate your resources across chains could help you basically provide better trade execution to traders and more revenue, more yield, more rewards for the LPs, right? And so basically that kind of complex build out, we make it really easy for builders, right? So we provide you with the platform that allows you to connect to all of these other chains, and we provide you with the infrastructure that you need in order to do that very easily, so that you deploy your application once and that application is able to exist everywhere, right? Basically.
That sounds really amazing. So it's almost like what you've built is really connecting multiple ecosystems and multiple chains and bringing people together for kind of like an all-in-one user experience.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Neutron is a very, new chain. It's still arguably in its bootstrapping phase, but, really the vision that, the sort of future that we envision is that, regardless of whether people know or not that, it's their assets are on Neutron, they basically just park them here because from here they have access to everything else, essentially, right? And so instead of having to move between chains and handle all of these cross-chain transactions and the security assumptions there, we just provide them with kind of a homogeneous bridging experience, which has a very high degree of security through a technology called IBC, which is the bridging protocol, let's say, of Cosmos, which uses client to verify the consensus of the validity, let's say, of the blocks on both sides of the channel, so that essentially if you trust the blockchains that you're communicating with, then you can trust the bridge. The bridge cannot change the bridge cannot cheat, essentially. And so using that protocol, we're able to basically allow two things. First, for users, basically you can just park your assets there and then deploy them, access every opportunity without having to handle the cross-chain complexity yourself. And for protocols, it's basically hey, build the brains of your protocol on Neutron, and then we'll allow you to basically expand your services to all of these other chains so that you can basically scale your business across chain a lot faster, right? So that's
okay.
Kind of
wow, I like that. So it's almost also a vehicle for business scalability as well, which I mean that's something that could theoretically tie into my work at Opolis, and maybe we can touch on that a bit as well. But yeah, so you've talked a bit about like the future and what you envision for Neutron. I'm curious to hear like what milestones you've accomplished with your team, and also more about the future goals you envision, like what milestones you'd like to hit in the future.
So like first, a pretty good milestone was Neutron is the first chain to ever launch on replicated security, which is one of the first kind of like shared security technologies. We talk a lot about like eigenlayers and others, but replicated security is live today. It's securing 2 different chains, including Neutron, which was the first to launch on it, and that itself is actually kind of a technical prowess because it's a fairly complex technology. It was never done before, and so we contributed with a number of the really incredible teams that work around the hub, like IFA, Informal, and others, all of the validators as well, to make it happen. And so I think that was a fairly significant one. I think the launch event was also, it's like the market today is definitely not in euphoria stages, but still with this kind of like single event that lasted for a couple of days and weeks to distribute the supply and the voting power into the future DAO. Basically, that single event basically made Neutron the top 7 chain, I think, in Cosmos in just of like a few days out of like 60 blockchains. So that was another, I think, pretty interesting milestone. Neutron recently, Hadron Labs recently proposed something that is being voted on right now, and I think I'm very optimistic that it will get accepted. But basically proposed the first blockchain merger in the Cosmos history, basically, whereby another blockchain project called Duality, which is actually a team that's originally from Ethereum that started developing kind of like very advanced market designs for like basically combining the best features and mechanism design basically for a DEX to allow like very, very granular control over liquidity and trade execution. Like to such an extent actually that they were forced to move to Cosmos to be able to build their thing, to really have control over the stack to the extent they could build it. We're in the process of like releasing this, and it synergizes very, very well with Neutron as kind of like this coordinating DeFi hub in Cosmos, right? And so we discussed with them so that there was a number of avenues that we wanted to work on together very, very closely. And so that's how we ended up proposing the merger, right? So merging actual blockchains together is another thing that I'm pretty excited about. And then I think the most recent one would be sort of like bridging RepSafeTeeth to Cosmos via Neutron. One of the like Neutron and let's say one of the issues with like for the Lido DAO is that there's a number of chain in Cosmos. It's a very sort of like particular ecosystem, and so left unattended, one of the likely consequences would be that multiple chains would bridge RepSafeTeeth in variety of ways with a variety of bridges, and you would end up with like various representations of RepSafeTeeth, which when they are bridged across IBC, then even become more specific and less fungible. And so you would have ended up in this like kind of like nightmare of denominations for the same asset, which is something that what would have been like a lose-lose scenario for everyone essentially. And so we worked on developing a solution that would allow multiple bridge providers, including Axelar, Wormhole, and in the future others, I'm sure as well, to basically co-secure a bridge that would result in having just one token that can be used across the entire ecosystem, that all of the liquidity can be aggregated around, so that it maximizes the benefits for the ecosystem, but also so that in the future Lido can basically, the DAO can basically shape the bridge to correspond to its like long-term vision and such. And so that's kind of like the first step in our collaboration, in what I hope will be a very long like journey of collaboration with Lido.
Wow, that sounds really positive. Just like you're eliminating barriers, building bridges between chains. That just sounds like a really positive thing that you're doing. And you did mention the word DAO. You said the future DAO, and I'm curious, like what Neutron's relationship is to DAOs or the Cosmos DAO ecosystem. I know I'm actually going to be on a panel with Jake Hartnell from DAO. If you're familiar with Jake. We're going to be speaking at NFT San Francisco. So yeah, I've been meaning to like dive into all the DAO things in the Cosmos ecosystem. So yeah, I'm curious what the relationship is between Neutron and the DAO ecosystem.
I think what we're trying to do is basically the synthesis of the kind of the learnings from both Ethereum and Cosmos, whereby I think on Ethereum you have like a very deep culture of DAOs. I think pioneered by like MakerDAO, Lido, and a few others that have really sort of like bootstrap like processes around like transparency, reporting, how you do like on-chain approval of certain actions, like how you manage permissions within a set of decentralized contributors. And so I think we're trying to like bring a lot of this kind of like culture and practice basically to Cosmos, where you already have a very strong culture of on-chain governance, basically, right? Every Cosmos blockchain today, or almost everyone, each of them has a module in their blockchain called the governance module, which allows token holders to vote on changing parameters or upgrading the entire network, right? So governance in Cosmos has tremendous power. And so it's been kind of like this, these years of like exercising this power as a community, creating the information sharing channels and such. And so what we're trying to do with Neutron is basically like bring them together, because on the one hand, the Gov module has created this like very deeply ingrained culture of like we own the blockchains, and basically our social consensus, we can manifest it through voting systems to like change the chains themselves. But the module itself is not super versatile, and so what we're trying to do is to learn from the more established DAOs on Ethereum to basically get better, more granular kind of like governance structures. So on Neutron, we don't use the Gov module. We use basically a combination of one module that allows our smart contract DAO to basically control the blockchain. And you mentioned Jake Hartnell. Actually, the set of contracts that we use, that we point to as the admin of the chain, is actually based on DAO, right? We forked it, added a few modules. We're now upstreaming a lot of code with DAO. We're actually they launched on Neutron like recently, and so the way it works is essentially you have like that top layer that I call the Agora, where it's everyone can vote on the decisions, like the most important ones. But at the same time, what we've seen in Cosmos is that like everyone voting on every decision doesn't really scale. Eventually, people get bored. They don't voter fatigue.
Yeah, decision fatigue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have this kind of like fractal structure whereby you have the main DAO, and then under the main DAO you can have sub-DAOs that have their own voting systems, their own sort of like mechanisms, but are accountable to the main DAO, right? So for example, one of the sub-DAOs that is being created and proposed right now is the grants DAO. And so they have a treasury of funds that is earmarked to do grants, and they can pay out grants by making proposals and voting on it. This specific DAO is, it has a multi-sig system, but it could have different selection mechanisms like elections or even liquid democracy. You can get pretty creative with this, but the initial stage is like a multi-sig. But similar to EasyTrack, it has a bit of an optimistic governance system whereby when the committee wants to make a grant, they can make their proposal. There's no super long voting period. They just vote on it, and then as soon as a decision has been made, it's executed. But it's not executed actually. It's approved or rejected, right? The outcome is instant as soon as they voted. But then before it can be executed, if it's been approved, there's like a 3 days period during which the main DAO can veto it, right? So you retain that accountability by way of like that optimistic track, basically, right? It's easy to pass, but then it's also easy to reject in case they go haywire and start like laundering money or what have you, right?
Wow.
So trying to combine these things is, yeah.
So I'm curious, just for any builders out there, project founders, what sorts of things do you think the Grants DAO is looking for builders to come into Cosmos?
I think there's a bunch of things. Like the main thing is, like, as I said, like Neutron is still in this like bootstrapping phase, right? And so what I guess the highest value things that we could be funding right now are people who have great vision of a product, a consumer facing service or product that they can bring to the market, and that we can support them to bring everywhere, essentially, right? So if you have a very strong DeFi product in mind, and that product would benefit from being able to scale across chains in a secure manner, then we're interested in talking to you.
So it sounds like you're looking for powerful value proposition, scalability, and something that brings in more people from various different communities.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so also just for resources for our listeners and viewers today, where are the best places to go to find information on Neutron, Cosmos, Grants DAO, DAO, all the Cosmos and Neutron things?
Oh, well, that's a difficult question. I think that's one of the remaining problems of the ecosystem, which is that information can be scattered a little bit around. For anything Neutron, just like look at domains with neutron.org. So like, neutron.org itself is our website. It's, we're updating it because it's actually quite old now. But so neutron.org, docs.neutron.org will tell you everything about how it works and how we can help. And then governance.neutron.org will give you a lot more, and forum.neutron.org will give you a lot more context around like what's currently happening, what's going on. Like for example, the upcoming potential like liquidity mining program, the grants program, the audit sponsorship program, and a bunch of other things like various like deep partnership with a number of projects like TimeWave, Astroport, Mars, and others.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, the Neutron website looks pretty impressive to me. Looks like you're backed by a lot of really amazing projects, Binance Labs. I see Coin Fund, Cosmos Station. Awesome. As far as like getting into DAO, Grants DAO, are those things like open to the community? Like, are they actively looking for people to join and contribute? Are there ways for people to get involved?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first place is just the forums. These things are like the Grants DAO specifically is being set up right now. So, it will get into activity, I think within the next few weeks once the proposal is approved and executed. But definitely like on the forum, you can suggest proposals, you can refer people, you can, keep them accountable as well. If you think that they're going haywire or making proposals to fund their friends, you can help, keep them in check. And then, there's a number of functions that must be taken over for an ecosystem to function. And so, not all of this is being done yet. And so if you see a gap and you would want to contribute, like definitely make a proposal for that, and we'll be very happy to support you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, afterwards, I'll just gather like different links that we can put in the description of our podcast and video so everyone has access to those. Now, this topic brings me into my next question for you today. So how do we build an economy that is active enough to sustain builders? How do we build something that's engaging enough to, keep people wanting to come back? And I guess in the bottom of the bear market, this is a really good question, right? Because we've seen a lot of people kind of become more disengaged.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously a lot of it comes down to we need to build as an industry, right? As we evolve, we need to build better products that solve like real problems and like provide value to people, right? That's kind of like the easy answer. But at the same time, it's difficult to do so if there's no market for you to address, and that, beyond perhaps like getting your grant, you're never going to basically be able to pay your devs to actually build this thing. And so, in Cosmos specifically, I think one of the limiting factors has been sort of like the lack of liquidity and lack of like value in DeFi, right? There's a lot of value in Cosmos, but most of it is currently in staking. And, because staking rates tend to be pretty high, it's very difficult for any protocol to basically compete with us, right? Some call this the hurdle rate. Now this is going to change, right? Like Lido is coming into the ecosystem. There are a few liquid staking providers like Stride, Quicksilver, and others in the ecosystem as well. And so all of them will, contribute to fixing this, but still, so liquidity is kind of like, in my opinion, the limiting factor here, because it prevents some integrations. It prevents, there being a market that's large enough to actually allow this activity to happen. And so, the way I see it, there's kind of like 4 ways that you can tackle this. The first one is obviously create new value, create new liquidity. And so every time, a net new project is created, it kind of like serves this purpose, right? And we talked about Neutron's launch event initially. That launch event, right, this set of smart contracts, their interactions, basically harnessed the power of like the value being created by Neutron itself, being launched by hundreds of validators, to basically lock in some value to sustain that ecosystem long term, basically. So that's the first one. Obviously, though, you can't just create new value like this every day and just like find a convenient way to tokenize this and put it into the economy. And so the other things that can be done, I think, go into 2 categories, basically. Either releasing existing value that is not in the economy currently, or importing it. And so when we look at Cosmos itself, there's sort of like 2 massive pools of capital that is idle, right? There's staking, which we discussed like very briefly just before, right? We know the answer for this. It's called liquid staking. It's pretty straightforward. Lido pioneered it. We know it works at scale. And so it actually was invented in Cosmos, by the way, fun fact. The first paper on liquid staking was written.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's awesome.
First one. Yeah. Little known fact. But so yeah, like, that is being rolled out. And the second prong when it comes to releasing is, we talked about the governance module of the Cosmos blockchains before, right? Just like they have a Gov module, most Cosmos chains have something that we call the community pool, right? This is the treasury of the entire blockchain. And pretty massive amounts of capital are sitting denominated in native tokens in these treasuries doing nothing. And because of the way that the tech is implemented, basically, it's not particularly convenient to actually deploy them, and you have structural disadvantages. E.g., as a DAO, if you have to wait for 2 weeks before the action happens, the market has ample time to front run you and find ways to make money off of your back, essentially. And so some of the most exciting projects on Neutron are basically leveraging its cross-chain infrastructure to basically build tools that allow DAOs and blockchains all across the ecosystem to basically participate in the economy and make deals between each other, right? Hey, let's do a token swap. Let's co-provide liquidity to a certain exchange that is aligned. Let's borrow against this to do something else. And let's, diversify our position so that when the bear market comes, we have reserves that we can use to continue, developing ourselves. So all of this, right? It's bringing sophistication.
I love also that you mentioned the awareness of, risk assessment and properly planning for a bear market, right? I think during the bull run, we saw all of these projects blow up, right? And then run out of funding and not take into account financial sustainability, proper risk assessment, treasury management. That's actually one of the questions we had put together for today. Like, why is having a business model so important for Web3 projects? I think you, began to touch on it there.
It's staying power, essentially, right? You can build the best set of the best set of pieces of code if nobody uses it, or if it's not able to continue attracting, people to use it, basically, right? Which in DeFi is very financial in nature, right? So you need basically a market around your code, essentially. You need people who want to demand and supply, and so because all of these things are kind of valued as well, you kind of need to be able to justify continuous improvement, having people contributing around it. And one of the largest ways that people have been doing this is basically by having incentives. But incentives without something coming out in the other way, eventually just disappears. And so basically it's both a kind of mechanism sustainability question, and it's also a people question, right? At the end of the day, you need people to not to operate them, but at least to develop these things, basically make them happen in the first place and improve them iteratively, right? So we had Aave v1, and now we have more advanced versions, same thing for Uniswap and other things, right? Lido has a router now, and all of these things require considerable amount of work, right? So at the end of the day, these financial these digital institutions need ways to basically, remain alive so that they can continue to work towards the mission that they set for themselves, right? Whether they're completely just pieces of code or also organizations with people congregating around them.
Yeah. And I think another good point to bring up, if you have your treasury in your native token, do you think that's something that's risky? Do you think that there should be a safety net of some sort of stable liquidity for a project?
Yeah, I think in general, that would be prudent. Yes. But it's funny to see how infrequent that has been, actually. There's a few projects that have done this. Lido has done this, actually, and it was kind of, I mentioned just before, structural disadvantages to DAOs, right? In that specific case, it actually played out pretty nicely for Lido, but it's not always the case, right? If you have structural disadvantages due to the fact that all of your actions are, handled by public code on a public ledger, it's very easy for the market to react to these things. And so when Lido wanted to diversify its treasury, there was a purchaser that was interested in getting exposure to the LDO token to get voting power and such. And, they made a public offer, but because of the governance delay, the price changed pretty drastically. Right?
Oh, man.
They had set a collar on the valuation that they were ready to accept, right? And of course, that created a target for the market. So the market just pushed the price above that. But they played nice, I guess, and they took it anyway. And so,
wow.
As I said, that played very, very well for both of them, I think, to be fair. But that's one example of why creating mechanisms that actually provide structural advantages to DAOs is sort of like required for them to be able to actually participate in the economy. Otherwise, it's fairly unfair for them, basically. It's very easy to front run a DAO unless there are specific mechanisms to protect them.
Absolutely. Wow. Definitely good food for thought for builders and people working on different projects out there. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit to another question we put together for today. So we touched on this a bit when talking about the multi-chain nature of Neutron. But this question I have for you is, how do we take into account the multi-chain nature of the industry? And are we condemned to going into silos, or can we create protocol architectures that create network effects?
I think that's the whole thing, right? So we actually touched upon this a little bit earlier, right? But the industry is definitely on a trend where it's becoming more multi-chain, right? And by chain here, I include both what we call L1s, what we call L2s, although they're really just chains with fancy bridges, but chains nonetheless. And so the number of blockchains that exist in the industry is consistently increasing, and a reasonable number of them is attracting fairly massive amounts of value and large user bases and such. And so, just how, as a builder, how do you approach that market, that topography, basically, right? Currently, if you look at the Ethereum L2 ecosystem, you're sort of asked to pick one, right? Which rollup do you think is going to be the winner, right? Pick one, and you better be right, because if you're not, you might have to re-encode your entire protocol because they use different technologies, perhaps different VMs and such. And so, that's a very difficult question to answer, right? And so basically, there's our thesis, I guess, is that there's an alternative. Maybe you don't need to pick, actually. Maybe you can choose a stack that allows you to not have to choose, basically. And so if we are able to create a bridging technology that allows you to securely interact with all of these blockchains, not only just trying to transfer tokens, but also retrieve information through cross-chain queries, and act on other blockchains, own assets on behalf of your protocol, your protocol owns an account on a different blockchain, then you can build applications that don't exist on a single blockchain, but exist across them, basically. And so in that case, there's no need to pick a winner anymore. Basically, you have now this your protocol has effectively transcended the blockchain that it's on right now. And I think as the industry evolves, and today, when you're using the internet, you're not thinking, oh, I'm interacting with an AWS server right now. You don't care, right? And so I think the same will happen to blockchains eventually, right? Now, we have this very tribal kind of relationship to the blockchain stack that we work on, probably in large parts due to one, proximity to the other people that are in that network, but also due to the fact that there's financial ties and loyalty to these networks, right? But in my opinion, if the long-term goal is to provide the best services and products and change people's lives by providing something better, something more fair, something more transparent that provides a better service, then eventually the blockchains are likely to fade from the public's consciousness, right? My grandmother is not going to care about whether I'm using or what. She's gonna care about hey, can I do something with that thing on my phone, basically? Assuming she can use her phone, which is something that I work on very hard every day. But so yeah, you get to see my point, right? If you can build applications that are not limited by the underlying blockchain stack anymore, because they are able to access different markets and access different blockchain stacks and therefore their features, then you're able to build applications that one, are a lot less limited, and two, basically, are sort of able to extract network effects from being on multiple chains rather than just being on multiple chains. Because now you can have things you can reallocate liquidity where it's needed. You can do internal accounting between your deployment, and a number of things like this that allow you to basically increase efficiency for your protocol and its users.
I love that. So I feel like where you're going with this is just our shared collective success kind of rests in putting the user first, making things as seamless and connected as possible. And that's how we all make it further together. I absolutely love that. I love that philosophy. Tying that into sovereignty and ownership of your work in Web3, how do you think that all kind of ties together?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think where the paradox is that, the idea of, there's a number of things. Like first, it depends on the application, right? For financial application, it seems like sovereignty is useful to a degree, but because, at the end of the day, really the value is in something, it's a financial or economical thing, right? So, if a lot of your economy is USDC from Circle, at the end of the day, the fork choice is kind of decided in parts, at least, by Circle and other, bridges and external forms of value that come into your ecosystem. And so for financial applications, like sovereignty is important, but in other ways than just, for the community or minority to just be able to express itself. Now, when we go into like more governance applications, actually it becomes like the absolutely critical thing, whereby you can even almost see it as like a way for communities to ensure that their technologies are not captured by like, tyrannical oppressors or what have you, right? And so you could imagine a future where blockchains are used, in North Korea, for example, to prove like to fight against like the regime and make sure that information and freedom of speech is like cannot be impeded, right? It's kind of like now, to bring it back to like today, I think like the point of sovereignty, right, is the idea that like if your application, if your mission basically owns the stack that it runs on, then it has the ability to access some degree of customizability that allows it to be better than the incumbent, right? Than other architectures like smart contracts, for example, that are somewhat limited by the like design choices, the trade-offs that are made by the underlying platform. Now, I think that's a very powerful idea. But the other thing is, like as we said, like today, this is like largely used to build financial applications, and so while that customizability is useful to build better products, they still need to be connected to the rest of the system of the economy, right? And so that's kind of like how I see, Neutron fit within, Cosmos and the broader interchain, right? Like you have all of these, you have this kind of like long-term trend of the best products, like for example, DYDX, moving to the stacks that allow them, all the best teams and best kind of like, protocols and communities and DAOs moving towards the stack that allows them to build the most cutting edge, the best kind of like product, right? And as this kind of like transition, as this thesis plays out, you're mechanically going to increase the fragmentation unless there is a solution to that. And so while IBC and other bridging technologies are, a big part of that solution, you are still needing that kind of like connector, right? That matrix to bring everything together, right? An ecosystem where, which is like a meta ecosystem, basically, that takes all of these applications, makes them easily accessible to everyone, and adds synchronicity and all of the rest on top, right? And so that's how I see Neutron. Basically, Neutron is kind of like the glue of the interchain. It's the thing that link all of these other projects together, bring them together into an ecosystem, and connect to like Ethereum, connect to Celestia, connect to the Cosmos Hub, connect to the interchain, the industry as a whole.
Wow, I feel like that was just such a beautiful synopsis, and I'm definitely really excited about this project and happy to support however I can. I also, like I said, do work over at Opolis, so maybe there's some synergy there for a partnership. I don't know if you guys are like super international. I know you said you're in France, but yeah, we're mainly based in the US. So yeah, I'd love to pick up that conversation sometime. So yeah, just out of curiosity, so I usually like to end the show by asking, are you excited about any future upcoming initiatives or events? Where can people find the Neutron team IRL?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you want to attempt a $5 attack wrench against us, then we're nerds. We don't go outside. Now, if you want to come and chat about like the future of like DeFi and governance and stuff, we'll be at Cosmoverse, which is the largest like Cosmos conference, basically. It's going to be in Turkey in October this year. I think the spots are close to running out right now. So if you're interested, like do get it right now. It will be there, I think, pretty like en force. So there will be like a bunch of us there. And then, like next year we'll be attending a number of conferences. We were at ACC earlier this year. We'll probably be there next year as well. So looking forward to all of that.
Awesome. Yeah. So in the description, if you're listening to our podcast, you'll see the links in the description. Also, same if you're listening on YouTube, we'll put the Cosmoverse link, and we'll put a link also to Neutron's website and also the discourse for Cosmos as well. So you can get involved in the community forum. Yeah. So Avril, any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to share? Any resources to connect with you as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm fairly available on both Twitter, Telegram, Discord, what have you. My nickname is Spade. And yeah, on Twitter, OX Spade, but otherwise just Spade.
Awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, where does the nickname Spade come from?
I tried to engineer a nickname that would be as hard to pronounce the first time you read it as possible. And apparently I did a pretty good job.
I was wondering that myself. So yeah, I think it was effective. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Spade, Avril, thank you so much for joining Crypto Sapiens today. And yeah, for everyone that tuned in, watching, listening, thank you for showing up. And yeah, we'll have another episode coming for you next week. Okay. Bye, everybody. Okay, friends. So before we end today's episode, I just want to take a moment to thank projects like Bankless DAO and projects like Opolis for making season 8 of Crypto Sapiens possible. So I just want to draw your attention to the links in our description. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the links there. Or if you're listening to our podcast, you'll also see the links in the description. The first is going to be Bankless Community. And for those watching the video, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So you'll see here Bankless DAO's website. You'll also be able to learn more about how to join Bankless DAO, the different guilds, and different projects that we're working on at Bankless DAO. And there really is something for everyone here. I think it's an amazing starting point for those looking to get involved in Web3. If you're listening to this and want to learn more about how to get involved, Bankless DAO is an excellent starting point. There's guilds for just about any interest here, so I highly recommend going to Bankless.community, joining the Discord, and saying hi and making some friends. To stay up to date on all things Crypto Sapiens, go to cryptosapiens.xyz. Here, you'll see all of our podcast episodes uploaded with a brief description of what they are, and you can also download them from here. Now, last but not least, a lot of you know me actually from my work at Opolis. So Opolis, if you don't know, is a digital employment cooperative. We do things like offer employer services to those working in the Web3 space, working on DAOs, or running their own independent business. So we help issue W-2s, pay stubs, and get you things like national healthcare coverage. So if this is something you're interested in, click the link in the description. All proceeds for referrals go towards supporting Crypto Sapiens. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of Crypto Sapiens. As always, stay tuned for next time, and thank you again for joining.